Mr. Mim, if you can just stay right there, I'm going to go ahead and recognize myself, and I want to follow up on what Mr. Conley was saying at the census. What's your biggest worry right now?
The biggest worry right now, I think, is that they have a series of innovations that are very important potential innovations that can have huge cost savings implications if they work out. They have a series of these innovations at the same time that they are canceling tests in the field for later this year and into 2018. They need to make sure that that they're able to have these innovations, the internet response, increasing use of administrative records, and others, be able to work together in concert in census-taking operations. That's a
how far behind schedule are they?
It's not so much that they're behind schedule. It's that they're in a sense racing to catch. They need to make sure that they maintain the schedule that they're on. They've canceled a test that's coming up, for a variety of regions, which they say is primarily driven by budget concerns. Budget concerns related to the continuing CR and other issues. We're quite concerned that they need to make sure that all these innovations are tested in census-like operations. That's key to making sure that they maintain the quality of the census, but then also delivering on a more efficient census as well.
Now, one of the things that is important to executing on a census, or going out and finding what ends up being a couple 100,000 people to go out and do the enumeration. I've been an advocate since I've been here to tap into the Postal Service. We actually have a workforce of people that have uniforms, they have clearances, we trust them, we've identified them, and they're familiar with the neighborhoods. They don't need to go remap the world. Have you done anything or looked at anything? We're working towards introducing a piece of legislation that would allow postal workers to do this. They may need to make more money to do it. It's going to take money to still train them, but they're already walking the routes. They already know the neighborhoods. Have you looked at that at all?
We've looked at it indirectly. I mean, I know as you've mentioned, Mr. Chairman, this is an issue that has been, or a question that's been asked of the Census Bureau for at least the last 2 or 3 census about the increasing use of the Postal Service in taking the census. There are cost implications. Typically, a letter carrier will make more than a census enumerator that would take place. It is, a pretty labor intensive, and so we'd have to figure out where they could find the time within their schedule. On the other hand, as you point out, they do know the neighborhoods, and in fact, in many cases, would know where the hidden households are, which is a major challenge that the Bureau faces. It's not just a postal address, but are there, basement units or something like that. That's the trade-off that would have to be.
And we also trust them, I think, is a big part of that issue. Mr. Dodaro, I want to go back to the post office. This committee is looking at legislation dealing with the post office. What happens if we do nothing? The current financial trajectory of the post office, what's your view of that?
Well, right now, they're not making the prepayments for the retirement benefits area, and that's a big problem. That's a growing issue. That means at some point those benefits are going to have to be paid. And if the Postal Service hasn't pre-funded it over the period of time, that's going to be a problem. They're already maxed out and they're borrowing from the Treasury Department at $15 billion. They can't borrow any more money from the Treasury at this time. Their other liabilities for workmen's compensation are going up. Their total liabilities, I think it's about 130% of their revenues at this point. So, but the underlying problem is the business model's really broken. First-class mail has been going down. It's likely to go down for the foreseeable future. It's the most profitable margin that they have, and they've taken major cost-cutting moves, but they don't have any major other cost-cutting activities planned, so they really need help. So we've put on the list, Congress has to act. There needs to be a reform in this area.
And we're looking at a bailout if we don't fix it, correct?
Yes.
This is something that I think is of urgent need for this committee, and I'm glad that we're on top of it, but we do need to pass a piece of legislation to fix the systemic problems. Fannie and Freddie, as a quasi-government agency, there isn't much exposure that the public gets to see or look under the hood. I've been working on a piece of legislation to give Freedom of Information Act request that the public could actually issue a FOIA request to Fannie and Freddie. Do you have any opinion or thoughts on that?
I could give that some thought. I mean, generally, I'm a supporter of the Freedom of Information Act.
Is there any reason you can think of off the top of your head that why they shouldn't be subject to FOIA requests?
Not off the top of my head, unless there's a lot of litigation right now, and I think that may be a complicating factor, but that's true for every federal agency.
That is, it's true for every agency. It
Yeah.
just seems that the American public, we have all the liability for Fannie and Freddie, correct?
That's correct.
Do you have any, again, you're amazing with numbers off the top of your head, but what is the ongoing liability at Fannie and Freddie?
Well, there's, in law, I think it's over $200 billion that potentially, Oris has the specific numbers, but it's over $200 billion that they could still potentially draw from the Treasury Department. They've paid more back than what the government lent them during the crisis, but if there's another downturn in the housing economy, their capital reserves going towards zero by 2018. At least at this time, we have a regulatory entity. For years we warned that they weren't regulated enough, but it came too late.
Right. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Just the specific.
Sorry, your microphone.
So Freddie and Fannie received $187.5 billion from the Treasury. They have $258.1 billion available that they can receive in additional assistance, and they have repaid more than $250 billion in dividends to the Treasury. So right now, they paid more to Treasury than they received initially in assistance.
It just seems to me with so much exposure to the federal taxpayers, the taxpayers should be able to issue a Freedom of Information Act request.
Yeah, I might say also, Mr. Chairman, on this, we've issued a number of reports about a framework that could be used to make decisions on Fannie and Freddie and some of the options available. So we'd be happy to share that information for the record.
Thank you. We now recognize